Imagine for a moment the harsh, windswept frontier of 13th century Anatolia. I want you to really picture it. It's a world completely suspended on a knife's edge, caught directly between two massive colliding forces. To the west, you have the fading, exhausted glory of a decaying Byzantine Empire. And to the east, something much worse, the terrifying, world-shattering Mongol war machine that is steadily pushing its way toward the Mediterranean. The air out here in the borderlands smells of wood smoke, livestock, and the sharp, undeniable tang of impending war. This is a place of rugged mountain passes and constantly shifting loyalties, where your survival depends entirely on the strength of your sword arm, the resilience of your people, and the absolute depth of your alliances. Right here, in this incredibly volatile and dangerous borderland, we find the roots of a man who would plant a seed that would eventually grow to overshadow 3 entire continents. His name was Osman.
Okay, let's dive into this explainer, because to truly understand who Osman was and what he accomplished, we absolutely cannot just look at a list of his military victories. We have to deeply understand the nightmare world he was born into. The mid-13th century wasn't just a tough time. It was an era of profound, literal apocalypse for the Islamic world. The devastating Mongol invasions had swept out of the eastern steppes like a force of nature. We are talking about an event that completely shattered centuries-old dynasties, leveled grand ancient cities into dust, and sent shockwaves of sheer terror across the known globe. The established political order of the Middle East was essentially erased overnight. And what was left behind? A chaotic, terrifying void. Roads choked with desperate refugees, local economies collapsing, and ambitious warlords fighting brutally for whatever scraps of power remained. And this apocalyptic storm hit Anatolia with horrifying speed. When we track the collapse through the mid-13th century, the true, irreversible death blow came in the summer of 1243 at the Battle of Kossedah. Try to visualize the dust, the panic, the overwhelming destruction on that battlefield. The Mongol Tumans, commanded by the brilliant and utterly ruthless general Baju Noyan, clashed with a massive coalition army assembled by the Seljuk Sultanate. The Seljuks thought they had the numbers, but the Mongols utilized their signature terrifying tactics: highly disciplined light cavalry, flawlessly executed feigned retreats, and absolutely devastating composite archery. In just a matter of hours, they completely annihilated the Seljuk defenders. It wasn't just a defeat, it was a slaughter. In a single bloody afternoon, the dominant, stabilizing power of the entire region was broken beyond repair. To put that into perspective, you have to realize what was lost. Before 1243, the Seljuk Sultanate of Rome was a cosmopolitan jewel. Think of grand, bustling cities like Konya. Think of incredibly wealthy trade routes flowing with silk and spices, protected by stunning stone caravanserais, where scholars, poets, and merchants from all over the world mingled. But virtually overnight, that entire magnificent structure collapsed into a fragmented, humiliated Mongol vassalage. The once mighty Seljuk sultans, they were reduced to mere puppets, confined to their palaces, trembling in fear. The real power now lay exclusively with the Mongol Ilkhanate overseers, who began extracting crushing tributes. They demanded gold, silver, and massive herds of livestock, completely draining the region's wealth and creating a massive, chaotic power vacuum, especially out in the rural, mountainous frontiers. This brutal, systemic subjugation triggered one of the most massive demographic shifts of the Middle Ages. The sheer scale of this is staggering. Historians estimate that around 200,000 Turkmen refugee households were violently pushed westward into Anatolia. Now, when we say households, we're talking entire extended families. That is potentially 1 million desperate people on the move. These were nomadic pastoralists, hardened warriors, and terrified families desperately fleeing the total destruction in the east. They poured into the mountainous borderlands, right up against the edge of the Byzantine frontier, a dangerous, untamed region known as the Uch, or the Marches. This massive influx of highly militarized, deeply displaced people created a highly combustible environment. It was a powder keg, completely primed and just waiting for a new, visionary leader to unite them.
Section 1. The K Frontier, a world on the edge. Let's zoom in on one very specific group navigating this incredibly dangerous new reality, the Kai tribe. Now, they were a relatively small but fiercely proud group of Oghuz Turks who had migrated into northwestern Anatolia along with the refugee wave. Amidst the complete chaos of the collapsing Seljuk state, the Kai managed to find themselves perched in the rugged, heavily forested hills of Bithynia, essentially acting as local border guards. But what really set them apart was their heritage. They carried a specific tribal mark, the Kai Tamga, which depicted a drawn bow and 2 arrows.
According to ancient, deeply respected Turkic genealogies, the Kai belonged to the Bozuk, or the elder branch of the tribes, supposedly descending directly from the legendary Genghis Khan himself. Out on the harsh steppes, this wasn't just a neat piece of trivia. This specific symbol represented absolute, unyielding strength and a traditional, destined right to lead. So even if they were just a small, relatively poor frontier band at the time, this ancient heritage gave them an incredibly potent prestige among all the other fleeing, disorganized Turkmen tribes.
We have to ground ourselves in the sensory, gritty reality of Osman's early life, because he absolutely was not raised in some quiet stone palace surrounded by silk tapestries and fawning servants. His world was the sharp smell of the pastoralist camps. It was the distinct, heavily woven black goat hair tents that swelled up in the rain to keep the water out. It was the rugged, unforgiving mountain passes of the frontier. His people wore thick, heavy wool and raw sheepskin just to survive the deeply biting Anatolian winters. His father, Ertugrul Gazi, led a modest contingent of about 400 tents, expertly guiding them on necessary seasonal migrations, moving up to the cool summer pastures in the mountains and back down to the warmer winter valleys. But more importantly than survival, Ertugrul ingrained in his people a very specific mindset, the ethos of the Ghazi. A Ghazi wasn't just a raider. A Ghazi was a dedicated, highly respected border warrior, a man who saw it as his sacred duty to protect the fragile frontiers of the Islamic world, while simultaneously raiding the neighboring Byzantine territories to secure the loot and resources his people desperately needed to survive the winter.
Let's move on to Section 2, Forging a Leader, born in 1258. So, what kind of man emerges from this environment? Osman's character was completely forged in this incredibly tough, unforgiving crucible. He was born around the year 1258, and that year is incredibly significant, because 1258 is the exact same year the Mongols completely sacked the great city of Baghdad, executing the caliph and effectively ending the Islamic Golden Age. Osman literally came into a world where the old order was dead and gone. But before he was an empire builder, Osman was, above all things, a careful student of frontier politics. He engaged in a long, quiet, intense apprenticeship under his father, Ertugrul. His rise to power was not some sudden, explosive, dramatic rebellion. Instead, it was a gradual, highly calculated mastery of a very delicate balancing act. As a young man, he had to learn exactly how to maintain the fierce, independent loyalty of his nomadic tribesmen. He had to learn how to navigate incredibly complex diplomacy with rival Turkish beyliks in the area. And he had to learn how to execute the holy war, the Gaza, against the local Byzantine lords without accidentally drawing the full crushing wrath of the regular Byzantine imperial army down upon his small, vulnerable tribe.
But here is where it gets really fascinating. Osman wasn't just shaped by the harsh martial traditions of the steppe. He was also profoundly, deeply influenced by a group known as the Aghis. Now, you might be wondering, who were the Aghis? They were these incredibly powerful, semi-religious Anatolian trade guilds. Think of them as a massive, organized brotherhood of urban artisans, tanners, and merchants who essentially stepped up to hold civil society together while the central Seljuk government was completely collapsing. The Aghis took Osman under their wing and ingrained a very specific three-part ethical code into his worldview. First, a strict commitment to civic duty and community organization. Second, an absolute uncompromising insistence on unwavering justice for all people. And third, a culture of universal hospitality, protecting the traveler and the poor. This ethical framework was an absolute game changer. It was revolutionary because it gave Osman the philosophical tools to look way beyond mere tribal bloodlines, allowing him to build a broader society based on shared values, mutual protection, and civic responsibility. However, let's not romanticize this too much. Leadership on this brutal frontier required a dark, highly pragmatic realpolitik, and the early Ottoman succession was anything but a peaceful handover of power. When his father Ertugrul finally died, a bitter, dangerous ideological split immediately emerged within the camp. On one side, you had a young Osman, deeply driven by ambition, completely wearing the armor of the Ghazi, and eager to aggressively expand and intensify the border raids. On the exact opposite side was his uncle, Dündar Bey. Dündar favored extreme caution. He wanted to appease the local Byzantine lords, pay them off if necessary, and strictly avoid rocking the boat while the Mongol threat still loomed over everyone's heads. The historical chronicles tell us this intense ideological clash ended in sudden bloodshed. When push came to shove, Osman ultimately executed his own uncle Dündar Bey, personally shooting him with an arrow. It was a violent, ruthless move, but it completely eliminated internal dissent and allowed Osman to consolidate absolute, unquestioned power over the tribe's direction.
Part 3. Myth and Marriage, Fact versus Legend.
As we transition into the next major phase of his life, we have to do something very important. We have to carefully separate the actual historical man from the towering myth, because the reality is almost no written records survive from Osman's actual lifetime. Most of what we know comes from deeply hagiographic Ottoman chronicles that were written over a century later. And those later writers often layered magical, divine narratives right over the gritty, dirty reality of Osman's early days to make the dynasty look better. The absolute most famous of these later legends is the story of Osman's dream. According to these chronicles, Osman was sleeping at the house of a highly revered Sufi mystic named Sheikh Idabali. While he slept, Osman supposedly dreamt that a glowing moon emerged from the sheikh's chest and entered his own. Then, a massive, magnificent tree sprouted directly from Osman's navel, its gigantic branches rapidly growing to cast a massive shadow over mountains, rivers, and 3 entire continents. Now, historians absolutely do not view this as a literal truth. Instead, it is a brilliant retrospective piece of political propaganda. It was a powerful, beautiful symbol crafted by later generations to provide a sense of divine justification, making it seem like it was Osman's absolute destiny from God to build this world-spanning empire.
And when you look closely at the actual historical timeline, you begin to see a stark, undeniable difference between this beautifully crafted legend and the harsh reality of frontier survival. While those later legends strongly claim he married Bala Hatun, the daughter of that mystic Sheikh Edebali, in order to cement his spiritual legitimacy, the actual surviving land endowment deeds from the era tell a completely different story. They verify that he actually married a woman named Malhun Hatun, who was the daughter of a powerful, wealthy local chieftain named Omer Bey. Why does this matter? Because this verified marriage was a highly pragmatic, incredibly strategic political alliance. Marrying Malhun Hatun gave Osman's small tribe vital, immediate military backing and resources from her father's tribe. It was a calculated move for survival and power on the frontier, rather than a purely mystical, destined romance designed to please the Sufi orders. Which brings us to Section 4, Magnet for Refugees, the Dispossessed. So, with his power fully consolidated and his strategic alliances firmly secured, Osman finally began to expand his territory. But here is the absolute key to his success. He didn't just conquer people, he absorbed them. You have to remember, he was operating in a region deeply traumatized by Mongol terror to the east and exhausted by heavy-handed Byzantine corruption and taxation to the west. In the middle of all this suffering, Osman's camp became an absolute magnet for the dispossessed. Desperate, hungry people from all walks of life were naturally drawn to his banner, simply looking for basic security and a sense of purpose. His true, unparalleled genius lay in his remarkably inclusive style of governance. Simply put, Osman didn't care about your ethnic background, and he didn't care about your past loyalties, just as long as you served the cause and obeyed his laws. He actively protected the local Christian peasant farmers right alongside his own Muslim followers, ensuring they could finally farm their lands in peace without fear of being raided. He famously recruited highly skilled, disillusioned Byzantine defectors. The most famous of these was a local Byzantine lord named Kosemihal, who eventually converted and became one of Osman's most trusted elite commanders. By successfully integrating rival Turkmen tribes and governing everyone with an ironclad, Ahi-inspired sense of fairness, Osman effectively transformed a ragtag band of frontier raiders into a deeply loyal, highly effective, multi-ethnic confederation. This incredible momentum didn't happen overnight. It steadily built up across several decades of hard work. In the late 1280s, as we saw, strategic marriages secured his political flanks. By 1299, he felt confident enough to officially stop paying tribute to the rapidly crumbling Seljuk state, effectively setting the formal foundations of his own independent territory, his own Beylik. But the true, undeniable turning point for Osman, the moment the world realized he was a real threat, arrived in 1302 at the Battle of Bophius. Here, Osman's highly mobile nomadic light cavalry actually engaged and completely defeated a regular, heavily armed Byzantine imperial army in open set-piece combat. This wasn't a skirmish, it was a major victory. The news of this triumph echoed incredibly loudly across Anatolia, proving once and for all to everyone watching that Osman wasn't just a local nuisance or a bandit, he was a legitimate, rising sovereign power to be taken very, very seriously.
Let's move on to Part 5. The Ottoman Blueprint, Building a State.
The stunning victory at Baphius and his subsequent systematic captures of key Byzantine forts in the region proved that Osman had fundamentally evolved. He was no longer just a tribal chief. He was actively, intentionally transitioning his people from a purely nomadic, raiding culture into a permanently settled, functioning administrative state. He was quite literally the architect of an entirely new kind of power structure in the region. He successfully blended the harsh pragmatism, mobility, and martial superiority of the Turkic steppe with the deep civic justice, taxation methods, and administrative needs of a sedentary agricultural society. Osman realized a fundamental truth of empire. To hold territory permanently, you couldn't just pillage it and right away. You had to tax it fairly, you had to physically defend its borders from other raiders, and you had to integrate its existing people into your own system. This incredibly unique synthesis, bringing the best of the nomad and the best of the city together, was the secret sauce. It was the exact blueprint that allowed the Ottomans to permanently succeed and grow, where literally dozens of other Anatolian warlords had flared up and failed.
Osman's long, extraordinary life finally drew to a close just as his absolute grandest ambition was about to be fully realized. By the early 1320s, he was quite elderly, increasingly frail, and suffering terribly from gout. Recognizing his limits, he formally passed the active military command over to his highly capable and fiercely loyal son, Orhan. Osman had spent years laying the perfect, suffocating siege around the massive, incredibly wealthy Byzantine city of Bursa. It was the ultimate prize in the region. Sadly, Osman didn't live quite long enough to see the city formally surrender its keys in 1326, dying just months before the victory. But he had prepared the ultimate blueprint for his descendants. He handed Orhan not just a victorious army, but a highly functional, economically cohesive, and fiercely loyal state apparatus that was entirely primed for explosive, unstoppable growth. Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. How is it that a simple shepherd, a man born into a violently shattered world, leading just a few hundred tents on a forgotten, dusty edge of the Byzantine Empire, managed to forge a state that would eventually grow to dictate the fate of Europe, Asia, and Africa for the next 600 years? I think when you look closely at the history, Osman's true legacy isn't found in the magical myths or the legendary dreams of giant trees. It is found in his relentless, gritty pragmatism. It is found in his unwavering, Ahi-inspired sense of justice. And it is found in his extraordinary, once-in-a-generation ability to take the terrified, starving refugees of a regional apocalypse and turn them into the proud architects of an entirely new world.